In previous video, we discussed about creating a simple component. Link is given below, or you can click on the card displaying on screen. So in this tutorial, we will be working with the custom view model component and its template file. Let's go with the text binding first. The text binding causes the associated element to display the text value. Typically, this is useful with the elements like span or em. Remove initialize function from component. Create heading property with the string value. Then create content property. Cut the paragraph text and paste inside the content. We will use both properties for text binding inside the heading and paragraph elements. Remove the heading text. Add data bind attribute with text binding and pass the heading property as an argument. Specify content property for paragraph text binding. Flush the cache and clear the static or generated content. Reload the page. The changes are reflected as expected. Let us inspect the elements. We can see the data binding attributes with the element and the provided value rendered correctly. Now add a new paragraph and specify the inline content as an argument to the text binding. A method can also be passed as an argument to the text binding. Go ahead and create a new method, getCustomText. Return a string and concatenate it with the content property. We can get the property using this keyword in the component. Now open the template file, add a new paragraph element and create span element as its child. Add text binding to the span element and pass getCustomText method as an argument. We must specify the parentheses in order to get the returned value. In other case, function will print the definition. Flash cache, remove static generated content. Reload the page. Now you'll notice the concatenated text rendered as expected, and we also get the inline text. Now create a new method, getPrice, and return integer value from it, like 25. Open the template file, create a new paragraph, and add span element along with the text. Now we will make use of arbitrary expression. Now create arbitrary expression and compare the get price with the first, let's say 30. If result is true, then return expensive, otherwise return affordable. Flash the cache and remove the generated static content again. Reload the page. As a result, the affordable string is rendered. Let's take a look through an element inspector tool. So we see the condition was false and affordable string was rendered as expected. The HTML binding causes an associated DOM element to display the HTML. This is useful for the text containing the HTML tags. Inside the content property, wrap the lorem ipsum with the strong tag and dummy with the em tag. Add strong tag to the concatenated word. Now open template file. Change text binding to the HTML binding from second paragraph. Do same for the span element. Flash cache and remove static content. Reload the page. From output, we observe the HTML tags are applied on the strings. If we inspect the elements, we will see the strong tags are added between lorem ipsum tags, and dummy is also added with the em tag. The class and CSS bindings add or remove specify CSS classes to the associated DOM element. Add a new property, nav section class, and assign a value nav sections. Now open the template file. Add class binding by adding a comma in order to apply it as an additional binding to the heading element. In argument, specify the property name nav section class. To use multiple bindings, we can use a comma as a separator. Flush the cache and remove the static content. Now reload the page. We observe heading has a gray background. Let us check with the inspector tool. We see the class binding worked as expected along with the text binding. Now inside the template file, we specify CSS binding. A JavaScript object should be passed as an argument to the CSS binding. We specify the class name as a string property and then true or false as its value. Let us specify arbitrary expression here. If value is true, the class will render, otherwise it will not render. Add message class using class binding. Flush the cache. Reload the page. Now the output looks very useful with the addition of new classes. One class is rendered from class binding and another from CSS binding. Modify the getPrice function and change return value to 35. And this time we will use CSS binding to choose between the classes using arbitrary expression. Flush the cache. Reload the page. Now, according to the expression condition, correct class rendered, the getPrice function value is greater than 30. So we get warning class rendered while success did not render because it had false value. The style binding adds or removes one or more styles associated to the DOM element. A JavaScript object should be passed in which the property names correspond to the style names and value correspond to the styles. Let's add style binding to the second last paragraph. The style binding takes JavaScript object as an argument. Specify the color of text based on arbitrary expression. If price is less than 30, the text color should be green, otherwise the text should be red. Add more styles like padding or border. Flush the cache and clear the static content. Now reload the page. The styles applied as expected. If we check with the element inspector, we see the binding specified with data bind attribute. The get price condition returned false, so red was rendered as a result. If we want to apply styles whose names are not legal JavaScript variable names, we can either put them in course or we can use JavaScript names for that style. After reloading the page, we see the background style applied as expected. The attribute binding allows to set the value of any attribute associated with the DOM element. Open custom view model component. Add a URL variable. We will use this variable inside an anchor element. Now open the template file. Add a new paragraph element, and inside it add a new anchor element. Begin adding the data bind attribute. The attribute binding accepts a JavaScript object. Specify URL property for href attribute. Then specify the anchor title after comma. Now we should specify the anchor text binding to display the text on front end. Now flush the cache and clear the generated or static content. Reload the page. The anchor element render on page as expected. Inspect the element and we will notice the binding applied successfully. Now let's add a target attribute with the underscore blank value. So the link should open in a new tab. The target attribute also rendered as expected. If we click the link will open in a new tab. That's all guys. Thank you.